Connie, and welcome to the Minookmii Indigenous OSP Adaptation presentation. My name is Melissa Pelichkoff. I'm a Minookmii therapist, and I'm also the Indigenous co-lead for the Minookmii program here in Simcoe, Muskoka. Today we're going to be providing some updates on the Minookmii program. It's really important to note that this is a part two, there is a part one, a presentation that was delivered by my colleague Leah Lalonde. It's a really important presentation. It lays out a lot of information about the relationship building process as well as the foundation of the program. So if you have not viewed that presentation, I encourage you to watch that presentation as well. Otherwise, we are going to be jumping right in. So today's presentation is really going to be focusing on the Minookmii program in terms of its theoretical basis. We're also going to be looking at the key principles of adaptation that have been utilized to form this program, change this program, and make this program into something that meets the needs of our community members. We'll outline all of the current adaptations that are in place within the program, as well as provide some ongoing recommendations as to where we would like to see this program go in the future. So the Minookmii program really is a sum of all of its parts, and where I would like to start with this is by highlighting our service sites. So our service sites, which are Mamawe Bannock and also Basami, are two service sites that are focused on serving our Indigenous community members in a very culturally grounded and holistic way. It's also important to note that Mamawe is both Indigenous led and Indigenous governed. So a big piece of the Minookmii program is that the clients who access these services have access to wrap-around culturally based support. So this means in addition to seeing a Minookmii therapist, they could also be receiving community supports, they could be seeing an elder, they could be having sessions with a healer. So for us within this program, it's really important to highlight that our clients are supported in numerous ways and that we really work to infuse culture into the treatment process based on the individualized needs of the clients. And then of course we have our allies at Waypoint. The relationship that we have with Waypoint has been extremely important to this process, and it continues to be extremely important to the Minookmii program. There is an abundance of support that comes to us from Waypoint, and they really have committed to a two-eyed seeing approach. We also have two very important circles here in our region. So we have the Indigenous Evaluation Circle as well as our Community of Practice. So both of these circles have facilitated knowledge sharing and interconnectedness and relationship building in our region. And these circles really have provided a safe space for us to come together and work on the adaptations that we're going to be learning more about throughout this presentation, as well as continue to examine barriers to access to service and other changes that we believe are fundamental when serving our Indigenous population here in Simcoe, Muskoka. Two-eyed seeing it's beyond important to this program, because really what we're doing here is we are bringing together this mainstream knowledge, this evidence-based treatment, and we are bringing this together, and we are standing in both worlds. We have an eye in both worlds. So we have our mainstream knowledge, and then we also have our traditional Indigenous ways of knowing. And both of these streams of knowledge play an essential role in the Minookmii program. We also have Magwendagwad, which is Sacred Circle CBT, which we will talk more about in the presentation. This is Charity Fleming's baby. She has worked so hard on this, and Charity has worked with us as a consultant on the continued development of the Minookmii program. Polyvagal informed therapy is another really vital component here that we have to talk about. So this is the approach that we are bringing to practice, and really what polyvagal theory is it's a really practical way to talk about being trauma informed. So co-regulation in our sessions, looking at behavior as communication, recognizing the effects that trauma has on a person are all fundamental in the Minookmii program. So this means we are spending additional time with our clients, both at the front end, throughout therapy, and at discharge, ensuring that there is a sense of safety, that there is a safe container built for our clients to participate in therapeutically. So if you don't know much about polyvagal theory, this presentation today is not on it, but it is a theory that I strongly encourage people to look into, because this approach to practice really, like I said, is a practical way to integrate this trauma-informed narrative that we're continuing to hear so much about. And the other piece for us has really been community engagement. So if you do decide to go back to Leah's presentation, or if you remember from Leah's presentation, consult with our own Indigenous communities here in Simcoe, Muskoka was fundamental and continues to be fundamental to the Minookmii program. We have to hear from our community to understand their needs. So having community involved in this process and keeping them involved, ensuring they have a seat at the table, has been vital and critical to the Minookmii program. So above all else, within Simcoe, Muskoka, relationships have been key. The relationship that we have established between Waypoint and the continued relationships that we are building with the province. We have taken our time to ensure that both our allies and our client base that we are serving recognizes the impacts of colonization. So this has been really, really, really important to us because the impacts of colonization have informed the way our client base, accesses our services, how they show up in treatment. It frames distress and trauma within an intergenerational and historical context. And this is really, really, really important. For the culture piece, we have been, really focused on ensuring that culture is integrated into our treatment process based on the needs of our clients. So we're looking at this from an assessment perspective, and also coupling it again with that contextual impact of colonization and historical loss. And that notion of cultural shame when we're talking about cultural efficiency. So this means that we're taking time to talk to our clients about the role culture plays for them in their life. What role do they want it to play? Do they want to be more connected to culture? And when you think about cultural efficiency, this is about looking at our clients' level of confidence. Regarding their ability to learn cultural ways, integrate ceremony, fill their bundles with traditional and mainstream knowledge. And this has really been recognized as a promising factor in positive treatment outcomes. So we really focus on cultural integration and cultural adaptation, but this is not just set out and laid out in a protocol. This means that we are ensuring we are providing an individualized experience to each and every one of our clients, and approaching this with understanding, with empathy, with consideration for what it means to be Indigenous to each and every individual client. And then we also have our practical considerations, which is a really important piece. So when we're talking about practical considerations, we're talking about societal and health system factors that affect Indigenous clients in our region, right? These are factors that affect treatment outcomes, as well as their ability to engage in session right from the very beginning. So how are they accessing the services? Are there any barriers there? Are there held beliefs about the healthcare system? Does more trust need to be built and established with our client base? So relationships as medicine, recognizing the impacts of colonization, intergenerational trauma, trauma in and of itself being framed within a historical context. individualizing the treatment plan in terms of cultural adaptation and integration within a cultural efficiency framework, which means we are individualizing this. And then, of course, taking into consideration all of these practical pieces that are really fundamental to producing positive treatment outcomes. So some of our very well-established adaptations include the way in which we define wellness. So, and this factors into the whole treatment process, but it's a critical component to assessment and treatment planning. So within the Minookmii program, we ensure that we understand Indigenous wellness frameworks because we want to avoid misdiagnosis due to different experiences, ways of communicating symptoms. So you'll notice that bio, psycho, and social piece within a lot of different programs. But the key here is we're also integrating that spiritual piece, and we're bringing a different approach to our assessments. So the Western definition and view of mental health is often too simplistic and does not adequately reflect the holistic and traditional views of our Indigenous community. So this adaptation has been critical right from the very beginning within this program. We also focus on Indigenous strengths. We want to highlight Indigenous ways of being and ways of knowing. We want to create a space where people can start to develop a sense of pride around their identity and pride in their culture. And our experience thus far has been that for some of our clients, engagement in the Minookmii program really has been their first opportunity to carry a safe sense of pride around who they are. And this has been a really, really important piece because we have continually noted that there are issues surrounding what we would label as cultural shame and issues surrounding identity for a lot of our clients accessing this program. So we really want to ensure that, yeah, we're doing that holistic assessment. And then also throughout the treatment process, based on that assessment, we are highlighting those Indigenous strengths, those Indigenous ways of being. And this is something that is modeled, by our service sites, across the board, and also integrated into our therapeutic approach. The incorporation of Indigenous culture, spiritualities, values, and ceremonies has also been key. And again, it's really important to note that we are not just, it's not just about indigenizing some worksheets. This means that we are individualizing this experience. So we can talk with our clients about the incorporation of a sweat or the incorporation of a healer. We can look at them, engaging in our Red Robe program as well. So we provide our clients with opportunities based on their needs to incorporate Indigenous culture into treatment as well as into their lives through different supports that we have at our service sites. So, this could be just engaging in community events. This could be having a smudge at the beginning and end of session. This could be incorporating stories that are very specific to the client who's sitting in front of us, cultural values. So again, going back to the piece around not just laying out a protocol of how we are incorporating Indigenous culture, but again, ensuring that we are doing this in a way that meets the individual needs of our clients. And I mentioned this in the last slide, but framing distress within the context of historical and intergenerational trauma is fundamental. We recognize the impacts that this has on our client base, and we assure that we take the time to have a conversation with our clients about this. So this means, often we're providing some psychoeducation on the effects of trauma, on the effects of this intergenerational legacy that is often very traumatic that has been passed down to our clients. And again, often, We have clients coming to us who have never had a safe space to sit and have these conversations. So these adaptations are currently in place. They are working very, very well for us, and they are all critical to the program, both of its success in general, the program, but also to the success of our clients and the outcomes that we're seeing currently. So we will move now into going into some of our service adaptations in more detail. So again, highlighting that these adaptations that I'm going to be summarizing in this slide are adaptations that are in place and adaptations that have been very successful within the Minookmii program. So when we're looking at access to service, there was a slew of barriers that were presented, and again, linking back to a previous slide, within our Indigenous evaluation circle, within our community of practice, through our clients, and just using that the service delivery arena as a place to learn from our clients so we can understand how to adapt the program. So Indigenous intake, this has been a very big piece for us. So at Waypoint right now, we do have an amazing team member there, Jordan. She identifies as Métis. She does this at intake. So we have an Indigenous person providing the intake right from the very get-go. So this is all, again, about establishing a safe space that feels good for our clients to share. We have created an Indigenous self-identification script that is utilized at intake. We recognize that there is a possibility that our Indigenous clients can fall through the cracks at intake. So we really want to ensure that when people access the OSP program, they know that, number one, they need to identify that they are interested in Indigenous specific services, and they need to feel comfortable self-identifying. So this is a process that we have, again, facilitated at intake with Waypoint. Another piece for us has been, as Minookmii therapists, we have both facilitated, assisted, and guided people towards the referral process and through the referral process. So this can mean potentially me putting the referrals through for primary care clients at Mamaway. This can mean a coworker of mine contacting me and letting me know, hey, I have this individual who I think would be great for the program. Could you give them a call? Could you provide them with some more information about the program? So this just means that we are supporting our clients when they are identified to us before the treatment process even begins, because we really want to facilitate a process for these clients where they feel like they have access to the services, they deserve access to the services. And this piece around assisting and facilitating has really helped establish relationships right from the very get-go. So this has been a really successful and important process for us. Looking at the OSP exclusionary criteria. So this is something that we really did. We had to modify this piece. Originally, when this program was laid out, we started to look at those exclusionary pieces, and all you simply have to really do here is educate yourself on the Indigenous burden of health. And we can take these factors, for example, rates of depression, rates of self-harm, rates of suicidality, the level of complexity that our community faces as a result of colonization. So there is a chart that I can provide everyone with that really essentially goes, okay, here is the Indigenous burden of health in Canada, here is the exclusionary criteria. And really right from the get-go, what this showed us was that although, this program is meant, for all people, and there's this piece around ensuring that Indigenous communities have access to it, The exclusionary criteria, before the program was even laid out and communicated to us, eliminated a large portion of our community. So again, if you're not familiar with the stats regarding this Indigenous burden of health in Canada, this is something that I strongly encourage you to look into and educate yourself on. Another piece is that we have really taken our intakes and we have moved away from a very structured form of intake. So this means that we are providing a semi-structural, more conversational approach to our intakes. And what this facilitates for us is storytelling. This is about storytelling, and this links back to culture. This is a very, very important piece for our community members, feeling like they're able to come into an intake with an individual who identifies as Indigenous. They are able to self-identify. They are assisted throughout that referral process. And then during their intake, they are allowed to tell their story in a respectful way. And I must say, our Indigenous clinician at Waypoint, she's extremely committed. She's very self-aware and she's very sensitive to the needs of our Indigenous clients during the intake process. Another piece for us has been the increased intake session lengths. So, I'm unaware of the complete typical time an intake may take in the OSP program, but what we have ensured that our intake staff know is that because we're moving away from that structure, because we are being more conversation-based to facilitate storytelling, this means that the length of the intake could possibly be longer, and this is okay. Another piece for us is doing intakes via MomAway. So this means that if a client, for example, does not feel comfortable telling their story twice, this is something that the Indigenous intake clinician at Waypoint can come to us about, and we are more than happy to facilitate that intake and do that assessment right up front, just to prevent the client from having to, potentially tell a very traumatic story more than once. So our previous slide really focused on that very initial piece, adaptations that we made just at that accessing service portion of the therapeutic journey. Now we're moving a bit more into the nuts and bolts here, where we're looking at adaptations that have been made to the service delivery model in and of itself. So again, I want to start with that piece around length of sessions. We have increased that time. So generally within the OSP program, we are seeing, sessions last 50 minutes to an hour. Minookmii sessions do tend to last longer than that for various reasons. One of them being that we choose to integrate often a smudge at the beginning or a smudge at the end. There may be more of a focus at the beginning of the session on nervous system regulation, on ensuring that our clients are feeling safe. So the actual length of the session in and of itself is increased. And we are seeing some of our sessions, they're lasting anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the client's need. Another piece here is that we are increasing the total number of sessions. So generally within the OSP program, we could see maybe an individual do 8 to 14 sessions. Within the Minookmii program, we are often seeing our clients engage in up to 20 sessions. And there are various reasons for this. Some of the reasons I would like to just point out immediately are that we recognize that there is a need at the beginning of treatment to focus on therapeutic rapport, to establish this polyvagal system nervous system regulation. So this means we are focusing on establishing safety, building that safe container, building a relationship with our clients, as well as helping them learn to feel safe in their own bodies, to feel safe showing up in our sessions, right? The piece around nervous system regulation has been key for us because we find as we start to move through the therapeutic process, our clients can think back to session 2 and 3 and 4 when we were extremely focused on helping them regulate and co-regulating with them and ensuring that they have those skills to be able to feel safe when they start to move into more traumatic material. The caseload size is something that has also decreased for us in this region. And again, obviously there is the piece there. It's very simple math. We can look at the fact that the sessions are longer. We have clients staying in treatment for a longer period of time. There's also some components around geography in the sense that we like to facilitate in-person sessions, and currently within our region we have Minookmii therapists who may be driving up to an hour, for example, to see a client face-to-face. I know currently within Mamaway, my co-worker Tony, who's also a Minookmii therapist, has started to incorporate horse therapy into her treatment plan. So this means that she might be doing a Minookmii session at a farm and focusing on embodiment and the integration of these CBT skills on the land with a horse, with an animal. So these pieces mean that we are more focused on, number one, individualizing the treatment plan for our clients. We're also very cautious and aware of therapist burnout and of vicarious trauma. We are aware of pieces just around minority stress for our Minookmii therapists. So our Minookmii therapists, as this program adapts, are also continually adapting. So we've moved away from that idea of, you know, here's the protocol and thou shalt do this, and it will take this many sessions. Our Minookmii therapists are spending more time on their treatment plans. They're spending more time recognizing barriers and coming up with adaptations. They're spending more time in circles discussing these things. So there is a whole slew of other reasons as to why the caseload size has been decreased, but these are just some of the primary ones that I want to highlight. The measurement-based care platform that incorporates and captures our Indigenous approaches to care. This is something that we have included in Green Space. So this is a way for us to track and provide data to Waypoint, to the province, around the Indigenous approaches to care that are being incorporated into our treatment plans. So if we're smudging at the beginning of the session, this is something that's captured. If we are having our clients engage in ceremony, we are capturing this. Is a traditional person involved? Is there an elder involved? So these are all things that we are capturing within the Green Space platform. And we think that this is really, really important because this tells the story of that individual adaptation and cultural integration that I have been talking about throughout the presentation for each of our clients. When clinically relevant, another thing that we have advocated for is a second round of treatment without the 3-month wait period. So we've had, for example, clients go through, and because we are trying to still be, you know, problem descriptor based. So we are looking at what is our client's primary concern. A great example would be a client who comes to us for depression. We create this culturally adapted treatment plan. We start to get them through the program. We're seeing a lot of behavioral changes. But as this individual starts to maybe increase their socialization or go back to work, they're faced with issues related to anxiety. Another great example is a client who may go through a round of treatment for more of a generalized anxiety. And what starts to come out of that treatment process is there's some specific markers of social anxiety. So the second round of treatment, the key there is when clinically relevant. So this does not mean that our clients, all of them just get 2 rounds of treatment right away. This is about identifying the need for it and advocating for it and being able to speak to as to why it is clinically relevant. There's time also allotted for myself as the co-lead of the Minookmii program, but also for both of our therapists in this region to be able to promote the program, to engage with community, so that they feel that yes, they are both connected to their service sites, but they are also connected to their communities, and they have time and space to be able to be out there with community members, educating them on the Minookmii program, letting them know how they can make a self-referral, maybe giving them my number so that I can connect with them to help support them through that referral process. Formal assessment measures are another big piece for us. So we have found that often the language within our formal assessment measures that we are using just doesn't translate for some of our clients. So often within the program, the OSP program, we're seeing the therapist send the client a key in advance of their session. Often within our program, what we're doing is we are going through the GAD-7, we are going through the PHQ-9 within the session, so that we can, number one, ensure that the client understands, that we can frame the assessment within a cultural context. Another big piece here to remember when we're talking about, again, this formal assessment measure being delivered in the session links back to the length of session again. So when we are facilitating this in the session and not before, this is going to, again, increase the length of the session because there are just more components to it. Another piece around the formal assessment measures is, and this has come up in our community of practice, in our evaluation circle, is that sometimes, the results of these formal assessments don't actually indicate the level of improvement we see in our clients. So being able to do these assessment measures in session helps the therapist understand what is really going on. And this is something then that we can document. So if we feel like, we've seen a lot of improvement and our client feels like they've really improved, but the assessment is just not capturing this, we ensure that this is something that is captured within our documentation. And again, going back to that piece around that optional integration of the holistic services. So again, just ensuring our clients know we have wraparound services, we can do land-based sessions, we can make this work for you within a cultural context. So this optional integration is something that we are always reminding our clients about. We are thinking about it throughout treatment, and we're also incorporating it into discharge or termination. So when we're thinking about relapse planning or self-therapy plans, this can include going to ceremony. This can include community events offered by Mamaway. So again, it's a piece that you will continually see highlighted, but I think it's a really, really important part of the Minookmii program. So now we are starting to look at Minookmii therapeutic style adaptations. So this is really talking about how our Minookmii therapists showing up. Again, starting at the top, storytelling is highlighted. We want to ensure that our clients have space and time to be able to tell their story. There's a huge cultural context to this, and it also ties into the piece around safety, the piece around feeling respected within the therapeutic environment. So our clinicians come in recognizing the importance of storytelling, and they ensure that they highlight it throughout the course of treatment. Lived experience is recognized. This is key. We respect, we recognize our client's lived experience. Often in CBT, we can become extremely focused on the present. We want to ensure that we take the time to recognize that client's life, to recognize the experience of their ancestors. And of course, this ties back into the historical context. This ties back into the effects of intergenerational trauma. So we want to ensure that our clients feel seen, that their lived experience is important, and we want them, again, to feel safe coming into this therapeutic space, sharing that. Trauma-informed, trauma-informed, trauma-informed. So as Minookmii therapists, coming into a therapeutic space with this polyvagal informed approach to treatment, we are ensuring that we ourselves are regulated because we recognize the power of co-regulation. So this means that as therapists, we are taking time to address issues of burnout. We are taking time before and after our sessions to regulate ourselves, to process. We want to be able to step into that session with our clients in a way that makes them feel safe before we even speak. So this means we're aware of our breathing. We're aware of our heart rate. We recognize relationships as medicine, and we see the value in this. We recognize the impact. So we want to ensure that we are stepping into that space ready to co-regulate with our clients. There is an increased recognition as well for our therapists, and again, you'll see this time and time again, of facilitating the wraparound service. So that is part of our therapeutic style. It is continually being promoted to our clients, and we are able to converse with our peers and other people providing services to ensure that all of our clients' needs are being met. So again, example, they are in the Red Robe program and they are also seeing a Minookmii therapist on a weekly basis. And the facilitators of the Red Robe program are aware of this. The Minookmii therapist is aware of this. There's a connection between the individuals providing care and the client. So again, integrated right into that therapeutic style. An increased recognition of Indigenous spirituality, of culture. These are very influential. So this may mean that we have a client show up in session and they wish to discuss a dream, for example, and the meaning of the dream and the spiritual impact that that dream had on them. We are willing to talk to our clients about these spiritual experiences in a really good and honest and open way, and bring that experience, bring that lived experience into session. This is a really, really important part because there may be a tendency for a clinician to want to redirect. For example, a client shows up and they wish to talk about a dream that had a spiritual impact. This is not something that we would redirect. This is something that we would recognize. And this is something that we would talk about in session and incorporate. So this is key, and if this means that we are using sacred medicines, then we use sacred medicines. If this means that we smudge at the end, then we smudge at the end. If this means that we go on a medicine walk or provide a land-based session or incorporate the equine therapy, then this is what we do. Because spirituality, culture, we recognize them as influential, and we want to ensure that this is integrated into our therapeutic approach. There's also a piece around an increased use of self-disclosure. And again, self-disclosure, it can be a hot topic. And really the approach here is that self-disclosure is encouraged because this facilitates therapeutic rapport. This ties back to the relationships as medicine. This is about attaching in a safe way, with boundaries, of course. So when we're talking about self-disclosure, we're talking about using self-disclosure as a therapist in a way that is therapeutically beneficial for our clients. This doesn't mean that we're telling our clients everything, but this means that we recognize when there is an opportunity to share something about ourselves and we're comfortable with that. And the need of the client is prioritized. And we recognize that disclosure as therapeutic. That is not something that we would shy away from. There's also an increased recognition of mindfulness, of emotional regulation techniques. So obviously within polyvagal, there's all kinds of nervous system regulation techniques. There's also a piece here around maybe incorporating, that mindfulness component at the beginning. Maybe our client decides something that makes them feel safe is a 5-minute meditation with the therapist. Maybe the client needs to focus a bit more on their breathing. Maybe we incorporate some progressive muscle relaxation at the beginning. So again, these are things that you would see in a mainstream program, but maybe not to the extent that we are using them, and maybe not to the extent at which we are using them in session, right? So there could be an emotional regulation technique or a mindfulness technique that becomes ceremonial for our clients. Potentially we do the smudge and then we do a breathing exercise. So again, tying back to the length of session, right? We are individualizing this based on our client's need. So now we are moving a bit more into the clinical component of the Minookmii program, which incorporates Migwindagwad. It is remembered Sacred Circle CBT. This is an amazing program that was developed so lovingly by our consultant Charity Fleming. So we have been trained in this program through Wilfrid Laurier. We have taken the Sacred Circle CBT course as Minookmii therapists. And we have a firm understanding of the direction that the Migwindagwad program continues to travel in. So Charity has developed protocol, and she's also continuing to work on the development of protocol for our Indigenous clients. She follows a template of adaptation developed previously, where there is a process of weaving together of Indigenous languages and cultural values, storytelling, spiritual and cultural knowledge into the actual clinical process. So the Migwindagwad program is extremely complete in that it is not just looking at Haudenosaunee. It is not just looking at Cree culture. It is not just looking at Ojibwe culture. There are pieces that the Minookmii therapist can pull or leave based on the client's cultural needs. And the basis and the foundation of the Migwindagwad program, it's holistic. It draws upon the spiritual aspects of self. It incorporates Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing and circle theory into some of the mainstream, more Beckian CBT interventions that we would find in a typical depression or anxiety treatment plan. There are worksheets. We have access to a slew of worksheets that have been adapted using Indigenous imagery, artistic expression, and cultural consideration. So again, just highlighting that the Minookmii program in and of itself is an Indigenous adapted service delivery model. And then Migwindagwad, it is remembered Sacred Circle CBT, is the basis for the clinical foundation of Minookmii in terms of what is actually being delivered in the treatment process. So we're going to take a little bit more time here on this slide to look at Sacred Circle CBT in more depth. So the Sacred Circle CBT session structure is being applied in treatment right now. So this session structure, it includes an engagement in an opening, a balance check, mindfulness, emotional regulation, bridging between sessions, the collaboration of today's medicine walk with our clients. Often there's a summary of teachings, both what we would call our mainstream CBT teachings, as well as the incorporation of cultural teachings as well. There's also a more formal closing, and when we talk about homework, we're not using words like homework. We're talking about living the good life. This path that we're formulating to live in a good way. So this is our between session work. This is our committed action because we recognize that when we put all of this in a historical context, words like homework could be very triggering of a residential school experience. So we change our wording. We change our approach, but as you can see, there's still the structure throughout the session. So we have that CBT structure, and then we have an adaptation to it that meets the needs of our community. The culturally adapted worksheets, again, absolutely beautiful worksheets. These are worksheets that we can use or we don't have to. Again, they are shown to the client. Would you like to work off the indigenized version of this worksheet, or would you like to use this other worksheet, potentially one that's already existing within the context of the OSP program? And more often than not, we found our clients that they would like to use those culturally adapted worksheets. They may see themselves in them. It may make them feel safer. Whatever the reasoning for it, again, it is their reasoning. The integration of the Indigenous wellness framework is key here. So again, tying back to that bio, psycho, social, spiritual, the piece around looking at relations in connection to one another, right? Integrating, as we know in CBT, we have the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviors. Well, really highlighting the interconnectedness of this within the context of an Indigenous wellness framework. The therapeutic relationship itself, both within Migwindigwad and within Minookmii as a whole, is seen as an intervention. So this is really, really key. The connection that the Minookmii therapist has with the client is an intervention in and of itself. The formation of healthy attachment with established boundaries, the ability to co-regulate with the client, the opportunity to provide a therapeutic space for storytelling where lived experience is recognized is key here. We also talk about picking up our bundles. So this is our Indigenous approach to psychoeducation. We talk about filling our bundles with knowledge. Again, these are adaptations that are within the Minookmii program, but very much clinically integrated into Sacred Circle CBT. And of course, there we see that two-eyed seeing again. So Sacred Circle CBT, at its core, Migwindigwad, that is what it is. That is having one eye in the mainstream and having one eye in Indigenous ways of knowing. And that really is the foundation of Sacred Circle CBT. There is a circle of strength model. Again, this ties back into the piece around highlighting Indigenous strengths, highlighting Indigenous ways of knowing. The language, storytelling, values, again, there is a slew, a plethora of worksheets and handouts that Charity has worked on that we have access to as therapists. And again, not only focused on, one form of Indigenous knowledge. Sacred Circle CBT incorporates different Indigenous ways of knowing. So there are options for our clients. There are options for therapists to continue learning. There are different stories that are used from different Indigenous cultures. So again, this links back up and ties back up to the piece around cultural efficiency and ensuring that we are assessing, integrating, respecting Indigenous culture from the very beginning to the end. Of course, what I want to highlight here is that Sacred Circle CBT is the clinical piece. And this clinical piece ties in Indigenous knowledge in such a beautiful way, in the way that sweetgrass is braided together. So having this training, having access to these great examples of two-eyed seeing, being able to pull worksheets, being able to learn about Indigenous ways of knowing, both for the therapist and the client, has produced more positive therapeutic outcomes. And that's been really important. And of course, on this slide here, again, highlighting that Minookmii therapists are trained and certified in Sacred Circle CBT. So here are, these are a couple other clinical considerations or adaptations that are in place within the program right now that are really, really important. So in addition to the consult from the OSP trained consultants, which we have found tremendously, again, supportive to us as Minookmii therapists, we are also provided with additional contracted external clinical consultation, and this ensures that we are being provided with culturally relevant consultation. So we have Indigenous psychologists who we are able to consult with. We have Charity Fleming as a great resource. So within the program, our therapists are provided with this additional cultural support. The OSP consultants that we do have access to, they are utilizing a companion document as an addendum to the provincially developed clinical consult guide for therapists. So this means the consultants that we have at Waypoint have a firm understanding of the Minookmii program, and they are providing consulting to us in a different frame of reference. They are looking at different guidelines when discussing benchmarks because they understand the adaptations that have been put in place. Another really big piece here is that Minookmii sessions are not recorded for OSP consultation evaluation. So there's various reasons for that, and that is a bigger conversation in and of itself. It links back to safety, it links back to historical context, historical laws, mistrust within the mainstream medical system. Also the piece around recording of ceremony or recording of Indigenous stories and whatnot. So there are some sacred pieces to the session that we just don't feel comfortable video recording or recording. And then there's also the piece around consideration for our client, their lived experience, and what that may feel like for them to be recorded, either audio or visual. So we really want to stay away from that. And our evaluation really comes through the connection that we have to our OSP consultant, from our clients, and then also from these additional cultural supports that we have access to. So looking at our continued recommendations, and I want to highlight here that, for example, DBT and ACT, as Minookmii therapists, we have started to incorporate these more third wave approaches in our sessions based on our client's need. But what we're really looking for is a formal integration of DBT and ACT protocol within the OSP program as a whole. And the need for this has been highlighted for us very clearly since we began providing treatment to our clients. And it's something that it has come up time and time and time again within our circles. So when we're thinking about something like our GAD protocol, for example, we may have a client go and do a worry log. And, they come back to us and we start to go through the worry log. And really what we're seeing here clinically is that the anxiety that the client is experiencing does correlate with the stress in their life. Our clients, these social determinants of health that we talk about, they are much more vulnerable. So we often have clients who may, not be living in a safe environment, may not have access to safe housing, may be living below the poverty line, may have extremely strained relationships with family members, with community. So the integration of something like DBT has been something that came to fruition to the surface very naturally, because we're looking at things in DBT like distress tolerance skills, being able to be mindful and embodied so we know when we need to use a distress tolerance skill, so that we can access our wise mind, so that we can work on emotional regulation, so that we can work to set proper boundaries with people, so that we can have healthier relationships through the integration of DBT interpersonal skills. So for us, for the individual therapists who have tried this and have started to integrate it, we have found it to be extremely successful. So this could mean that, we are doing a couple sessions where we are reviewing some DBT skills, or it could mean that we are continually integrating DBT skills into that between session work, into our sessions as resources for our clients. Because when we look at CBT as a whole, it's a very hard thing to define. And we know with the third wave approaches, there's an umbrella here of tools that we can use. And as Minookmii therapists, what we really want to do is know what's on the menu and be able to integrate these skills when our clients need them. The piece around the ACT, that acceptance and commitment therapy, often individual therapists have come and said, I'm more successful working with my clients when we focus on acceptance as opposed to, challenging automatic thoughts. So we're not by any means saying that, all Indigenous community members need DBT and ACT, but what we are saying is that we've used the service delivery arena as a space to try this out. And it has been very, very successful. So as a whole, we would like to see the formal integration of DBT and ACT into the OSP program. A NET protocol. Now, this is something that we are currently working on right now, developing. So we're working very closely, myself, I'm working very closely with Charity Fleming to develop a narrative exposure therapy protocol for our Indigenous community members. And the reason for this is that when we think back to the piece around the Indigenous burden of health, and we noted that we have clients who are more complex. And we know that they are more complex because we are framing them within the context of colonization, within the context of intergenerational trauma, within the context of continued racism in Canada, within the context of reconciliation, within the context of historical shame, intergenerational loss. All of these things mean that our clients are more complex. So when we're looking at a protocol like CPT or prolonged exposure, we're really focused there clinically on finding an acute trauma, right? An index trauma. Within our community, we are having people come to us for depression, come to us for anxiety. And during the assessment, it becomes extremely clear that this individual has a very complex history, numerous ACEs. So what we want to do here is we want to integrate a protocol that meets the needs of somebody who is not presenting with an acute trauma. This is not a first responder who's coming and is having flashbacks because of a fire he ran into last week. We have clients who are presenting the problem descriptor is generalized anxiety, and in assessment, you find out there's years of abuse, witnessing violence, sexual abuse, a whole host of things. Ongoing traumatization right now. And again, framing this distress within the context of colonization. So when you look at something like a NET protocol, which again is CBT based, we are looking at the lived experience. We're creating that trauma timeline. We're building a narrative about the client's life. It facilitates storytelling. It's still CBT, but we want to build a protocol that meets the needs of someone who has experienced this level of complex trauma. So this is something that we have in the works right now. This is something that will be a formal offering through Minookmii and something that we want to incorporate into the OSP program for our clients. But again, overall, we know that intergenerational trauma is not exclusive to our Indigenous population, and we recognize that there's a focus on serving minorities, on serving vulnerable populations within the OSP program. So when we're looking at something like a NET protocol, this is something that could be integrated or established for the whole program as well to meet the needs of people who present as more complex. A big piece here for us as well is the contracts. So when we're thinking about, for example, the slide on the increased session length, right? So actually the time spent in session. And then we have increased number of sessions. So up to 20 sessions right now to ensure that we have time to integrate culture, to ensure that we have time to establish healthy attachment and healthy relationship, so that we can focus on co-regulation, so that we can ensure that our clients feel safe. This means that the indicator developed by the province, which is total number of unique clients served, will never be reflective of the work that we are doing. So a better indicator for us would be number of sessions provided, for example. The piece here that is a bit discouraging is that despite the fact that we've been given the go-ahead to move forward with these adaptations, the contracts that we have, our service sites with Waypoint, do not reflect the adaptations and do not reflect indicators that would truly highlight the success that the Minookmii program is having. So having contracts that reflect our adaptations, that reflect the indicators that make sense for us, is really, really important, because this to us not only ensures that there is less maybe stress around the contract and the delivery of the indicators that we see in it, but it also represents a respect at a bigger level that that these adaptations are important and that they can be reflected in a contract. Clearer pathways and communication and connection for our Indigenous stakeholders with the Center for Excellence, with the province. We want to be connected. We want to talk about what we're doing. We want to be able to share our knowledge. We want to be able to feel supported as we continue to adapt the program. So establishing healthy relationships and healthy connections with, for example, the Center for Excellence and provincial representation, representatives. These are really, really important to us as well. And we do have our executive director who does sit at these tables, but what we're looking for here is a clearer pathway for example, for myself or another member of our Indigenous evaluation circle, so that we know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we are the ones speaking on it, but we know that we can pass on a working document, for example, that highlights the adaptations up until now and the recommendations that we have to someone, and that will continue to make its way up the line so that we feel like our voices are really being heard. We would really like to see formal pathways for adaptation. This is really key, even possibly moving towards that formalization of an Indigenous stream of the OSP program. So for us, this whole slide is about continuing to look at protocol integration that meets the needs of our Indigenous community. It also means ensuring that the work that we're doing, the knowledge that we're building in our region, it continues to move forward. It continues to move forward because the Minookmii program, the adaptations to this service delivery model, is something that can serve as an example for other regions, for other provinces. Just looking at that, again, going back to that Indigenous burden of health and looking at that exclusionary criteria, I think there's some really, really important lessons here that can be learned. So we really just want to keep working on those relationships, on those connections, so that we can feel like we're all moving forward in this process of reconciliation, and feeling like we have allies and our voices are heard beyond just our region. So this concludes our presentation. If there are any questions at all, please feel free to contact me either via telephone or via email. I'm very open to having additional conversations about this presentation, about things related to this presentation. And I just really want to say miigwech to everyone who took the time to follow me through these PowerPoints. It's really important that we continue to work towards the continued development of a program that we are currently having so much success with, but that we feel like can continue to grow and can continue to meet the needs of Indigenous community members. So miigwech, and have a beautiful day.